He believed he was judging the world, a god in a clever disguise, never suspecting that the world, through the eyes of one woman, was judging him right back. The air inside Elysian timepieces was a rarefied thing, smelling of polished mahogany, old leather, and the silent, astronomical cost of measuring moments. Light, meticulously curated by unseen fixtures, glinted off sapphire crystal faces and diamond-studded bezels, turning the showroom into a constellation of earthly stars. Each watch, nestled in its velvet throne, was not merely an instrument, but a declaration, a testament to power, success, and a life lived far from the vulgarity of want. Into this sanctuary of opulence walked a ghost. The man who entered was an anomaly, a smudge on a pristine canvas. His shirt, a shade of gray that spoke of 1,000 washings, hung loosely on a frame that seemed weary of its own weight. His light brown pants were clean but creased with the permanence of age, and his shoes, scuffed at the toes, made no sound on the plush Persian rug, as if ashamed to announce their presence. This was the disguise of Mr. Jinwoo Park, a man for whom the entire building was but a minor asset, a name whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in the city's shadowed boardrooms and clandestine meetings. He was the unseen owner, the architect of this empire, and today, he was a nobody. His heart, a fortress of cynicism built from years of seeing humanity's worst, had devised this test. He wanted to see the soul of his own creation. He wanted to know if decency existed when there was nothing to be gained. He scanned the room, his gaze deliberately downcast, projecting auras of meekness and intimidation. He was a struggling man, perhaps looking to sell a cherished heirloom, or worse, a dreamer with empty pockets wasting their time. The first to notice him was the store manager, Ms. Soo-min Choi. She stood near the main counter, a statuette of severe elegance. Her black dress was a sheath of tailored perfection, her hair a glossy black helmet, and her expression a carefully maintained mask of polite disdain. When her eyes fell upon Jinwoo, the politeness evaporated, leaving only the disdain. A flicker of irritation, minute but venomous, crossed her face. She saw not a person but a problem, a stain. She turned her back to him with a deliberate, dismissive grace, her body language a shout in the quiet room. "You do not belong here." She made a small, almost imperceptible gesture to another salesperson, a young man who immediately understood, busying himself with polishing an already immaculate glass case, his attention locked away. The message was clear. Ignore him, and he will evaporate. This was the protocol for the undesirable. From across the room, another pair of eyes watched the silent, cruel theater unfold. Kiera Washington stood by a display of classic chronographs, her posture poised and professional despite the bone-deep weariness she felt. Her uniform was immaculate, a stark contrast to the frayed edges of her own life. Kiera was a woman walking a tightrope over an abyss of debt, a single mother whose world revolved around a bright-eyed 7-year-old girl named Chloe and the perpetually overdue rent notice stuck to her refrigerator door. Every smile she offered a customer was an act of defiance against the crushing weight on her shoulders. She saw the man in the gray shirt, and she saw Ms. Choi's reaction. A familiar, bitter ache bloomed in her chest.
She knew that look.
It was the look of judgment, the swift, merciless calculation of a person's worth based on the fabric of their clothes. She had been on the receiving end of that look her entire life. Her heart, unlike her manager's, did not see a problem. It saw a man, perhaps lost, perhaps grieving, perhaps simply a man. Ms. Choi's strategy of willful ignorance was an art form. She glided over to a wealthy-looking couple, her voice a melodic chime of deference and expertise, a sound she reserved only for those whose wrists dripped with potential commissions. She pointed out the intricate tourbillon movement of a platinum masterpiece, her words weaving a tapestry of exclusivity and legacy. All the while, her awareness was fixed on the shabby man who refused to disappear. Jinwoo, a master of reading people, observed it all. He saw the subtle tension in Soo-min's shoulders, the way her smile for the rich couple was a fraction too wide, a performance strained by her annoyance. He shuffled his feet, letting the silence stretch, a quiet act of rebellion. He was testing the store's breaking point. Finally, Soo-min could bear it no longer. With the couple momentarily distracted, She shot a razor-sharp glare across the room, not at Jinwoo, but at Kiera. It was an order, unspoken but absolute. Handle this. Get rid of him. Kiera felt the weight of that glare. It was a choice. Obey and compromise a core piece of her soul. Disobey and risk the job that kept a roof over her daughter's head. The rent was 3 weeks late. The final notice had arrived that morning. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked at her. But then she thought of Chloe and the lessons she was trying to teach her about kindness, about seeing the person, not their possessions. What kind of mother would she be if she preached a gospel she was too afraid to live? She took a deep, steadying breath, the air of the showroom feeling suddenly thin. With a quiet grace that was entirely her own, she stepped away from her station and began to walk towards the man everyone else was trying to erase. Her steps were a silent declaration against the cold calculus of her manager. She offered him a small, genuine smile, one that reached her tired eyes. "Welcome to Elysian Timepieces," she said, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the refrigerated air. "My name is Kiera. How may I help you today?" Jinwoo looked up, meeting her eyes. He had been prepared for suspicion, for condescension, for impatience. He was not prepared for the simple, unadorned warmth in her gaze. It was like finding a wildflower pushing through a crack in a concrete fortress. For a moment, the hardened cynic, the Mafia boss, the master of a brutal world, was genuinely thrown. He had to remind himself to stay in character. He hunched his shoulders slightly, a physical manifestation of humility. I'm not sure you can," he began, his voice deliberately hesitant, raspy. "I'm not here to buy." "Not really." He watched her for any sign of a faltering smile, a flicker of disappointment that he was not a lucrative sale. He saw none. Her expression remained open, patient. "That's perfectly all right," Kiera replied smoothly. "Sometimes just looking is a pleasure. Is there anything in particular you wanted to see? Or perhaps you have a question about a piece you already own?" This was the opening he had planned. "It's an old watch," he said, the lie tasting strange on his tongue. "My father's. It stopped working years ago. I keep it in a drawer, but my son's birthday is coming up. I thought maybe I could get it fixed." "Pass it down." He let a note of wistful sadness enter his voice, a performance honed by decades of negotiation and intimidation, now repurposed for this small, quiet stage. He was testing for greed. He expected her to immediately pivot, to explain that repairs were costly, and that perhaps a new, albeit cheaper, watch would be a better investment. He was laying a trap, waiting for her to expose the profit-driven heart of the business. Instead, Kiera's expression softened with a wave of genuine empathy. She leaned in slightly, creating a small bubble of intimacy in the vast, impersonal showroom. "That sounds like a beautiful tradition," she said, and he could hear the sincerity in her voice. It was unnerving. Sometimes the watches that tell the most important stories aren't the ones in these cases. The value isn't in the brand, it's in the memories they hold. This was not in his script. He had anticipated a polite dismissal or a sales pitch. He had not anticipated a lesson in sentiment from a salesperson in a store that sold items for the price of a house. He found himself momentarily speechless. "Do you have the watch with you?" Kiera asked gently. He shook his head. "No. I was afraid of what it might cost just to look at it." The words were meant to sound pathetic, to elicit either pity or scorn. Kiera's response was, once again, disarmingly kind. "I understand completely," she said. "Why don't you bring it in sometime? I can take a look at it for you, no charge at all. Our technicians are incredible, but if it's a simple fix, I might even be able to recommend a wonderful independent watchmaker downtown. He's an artist, and he's very honest with his pricing." She was actively trying to save him money, potentially sending business elsewhere. In the cutthroat world of luxury retail, it was an act of heresy. In Jinwoo's world, it was an act of inexplicable, foolish decency. He felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest, a feeling so alien he almost recoiled from it. A genuine smile, small and fleeting, touched his lips before he could stop it. "You would do that?" he asked, his voice losing some of its feigned fragility. "Of course," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A father's watch deserves a little respect from across the store. Ms. Choi watched this exchange, her face a mask of thunderous fury. She saw not a moment of human connection, but a catastrophic breach of protocol. She was witnessing an employee squandering precious minutes on a zero-commission ghost, and worse, tarnishing the store's aura of untouchable prestige. The polite mask was gone, replaced by the cold, hard face of a woman whose authority had been challenged. As soon as Jin-woo had departed, promising to return with a fictional watch, Ms. Choi descended upon Kiera like a hawk. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with sharp, angry reports. She didn't wait for them to be in the privacy of the back office. She cornered Kiera by a display case, her voice a low, furious hiss, meant for her ears alone but radiating a palpable menace. "What, exactly, do you think you were doing?" she demanded. Kiera stood her ground, her hands clasped calmly in front of her. "I was assisting a customer." Miss Choi, the manager, let out a short, incredulous laugh that was devoid of any humor. "A customer? That man couldn't afford the leather strap on one of these watches, let alone the timepiece itself. You were wasting company time, and more importantly, you were cheapening our brand." Kiera's jaw tightened, but her voice remained even. "With all due respect, my job is to assist anyone who walks through that door. We don't have a dress code for patrons." This was a dangerous line to take, but the injustice of the situation had kindled a fire in her. Sumin leaned closer, her perfume cloying and aggressive. "Your job is to sell. Your job is to cultivate an atmosphere of exclusivity. When a man like that walks in, you are to be polite, brief, and unavailable. You make him understand, without saying a word, that he is in the wrong place. You do not invite him back. You do not offer him advice. You do not engage in sentimental nonsense about his father's broken junk." The word junk was delivered with particular venom. A text message vibrated in Kiera's pocket. She didn't need to look. She knew it was from her landlord, the daily reminder that now included a threat of eviction proceedings. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach, but it paradoxically strengthened her resolve. This job, this life, was hard enough without having to sacrifice her own dignity. "My mother taught me that you measure a person's character by how they treat someone who can do nothing for them," Kiera said quietly, her words a direct challenge. "I believe that applies to businesses as well." Ms. Choi's eyes narrowed into slits. "Your mother isn't paying your salary. I am. Consider this your final warning, Washington. Step out of line again, and you'll be looking for a new place to preach your little sermons." The following day, Jin-woo returned. He had spent the night wrestling with the encounter, the woman's simple decency a persistent, nagging anomaly in his perfectly ordered, cynical worldview. He had decided to escalate the test. He needed to see if her kindness had a breaking point. This time, as he shuffled past the main counter, he feigned a clumsy stumble, his arm knocking against a small, velvet-lined pedestal. A single, exquisitely crafted rose gold watch, priced at $50,000, slid from its perch and clattered onto the marble floor. The sound was offensively loud in the cathedral-like silence. Every head turned. Miss Choi was there in an instant, her face pale with rage. She snatched the watch from the floor, her eyes scanning it for imperfections. "You incompetent fool," she shrieked, her carefully constructed composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. She was no longer performing for the wealthy clients. She was venting a primal fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This is a Patek Philippe. The cost of this watch is more than you will make in your entire miserable life." Jin-woo cowered, playing his part to perfection. "I'm so sorry, it was an accident." I tripped. His apology was drowned out by her tirade. "An accident? People like you are accidents. You wander into places you don't belong, and you break things. You will pay for this. Every single cent. I'm calling security. We will hold you until you figure out how to pay for the damages." She was creating a spectacle, a public crucifixion to serve as a warning to any other undesirables who might dare to cross her threshold. Her cruelty was breathtaking in its totality. She held the watch up as if it were a sacred relic he had defiled, her face contorted in a mask of righteous indignation. The other customers watched, some with pity, others with a detached sense of morbid curiosity. Jin-woo felt a cold, familiar rage begin to stir beneath his disguise. This was the ugliness he had expected. This was the world as he knew it. That won't be necessary, Kiera's voice, though quiet, sliced through the manager's tirade with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. She moved to stand between the towering rage of Ms. Choi and the cowering figure of Jinwoo. She calmly took the watch from her manager's trembling hand, her touch gentle and sure. She held it up to the light, her eyes, trained from years of handling such delicate mechanisms, examining it with an expert's focus. The room held its breath. "There's not a scratch on it, Ms. Choi," Kiera announced, her voice firm and clear for all to hear. "The crystal is sapphire. The case is solid gold. These timepieces are built to last." "It is perfectly fine," Ms. Choi snatched the watch back. "I will be the judge of that. There could be damage to the movement." He was negligent. Kiera did not flinch. She looked directly at her manager, her gaze unwavering. "It was a minor fall, and he has apologized. There is no need to involve security or humiliate him." Sumin's face purpled with rage. "Humiliate him? He humiliated the store. And you're fired, Washington. Fired. For insubordination. For incompetence. For your bleeding heart stupidity." The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Kiera's own future was now ashes. The rent, Chloe, the apartment, it all flashed before her eyes. Yet, in that moment of professional ruin, she felt not fear, but a strange, liberating calm. She had made her choice. She turned to Jinwoo, her eyes filled not with pity, but with a profound and steadying respect. "Sir," she said, her voice ringing with authority, "if there is any damage, which I highly doubt, I will cover the cost of the repair myself. You can send the bill to me." She was offering to take on a potentially ruinous debt for a complete stranger, a man who represented the very bottom of the social ladder she was so desperately trying to climb. It was an act of pure, uncalculated grace. It was the final piece of evidence Jinwoo needed. A profound shift occurred in the man in the gray shirt. The weary slump in his shoulders straightened. The meek, downcast gaze lifted, and the eyes that now surveyed the room were not those of a frightened pauper, but of a king surveying his court. A cold, lethal authority radiated from him, silencing the murmurs of the onlookers. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, and it was Ms. Choi who instinctively recoiled. His voice, when he spoke, was unrecognizable. It was deep, resonant, and carried an absolute power that vibrated in the very air of the showroom he owned. "That will not be necessary, Ms. Washington," he said, the words cutting through the tension. He turned his gaze upon the stunned store manager. "And you, Ms. Choi," he continued, his tone dropping to a dangerously quiet level, "are not in a position to fire anyone. But I am," he paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "And you are fired, effective immediately. Have your personal belongings cleared out within the hour. Security will escort you." The shock on Sumin's face was a grotesque mixture of confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. Who do you think you are?" she stammered. He reached into the pocket of his worn pants and pulled out not a wallet, but a simple, elegant business card. He didn't hand it to her. He flicked it onto the counter. It spun for a moment before landing face up. Jinwoo Park, Chairman, Elysian Holdings. The name was a thunderclap. Sumin stared at the card, then back at the man, her mind struggling to reconcile the pauper with the patriarch. The color drained from her face, leaving a sickly, waxy pallor. "I built this company on a principle of timeless value," Jinwoo said, his voice now a calm, deadly indictment. "A value that you, with your obsession with price tags and appearances, have fundamentally failed to understand. You judged a man by his clothes, and in doing so, you revealed the utter poverty of your own character." He then turned to Kiera, his expression softening, the cold fury replaced by a deep, profound respect. "Ms. Washington, on the other hand, understands true value. She showed dignity, integrity, and a humanity that is more precious than every timepiece in this room combined. She is the standard. She is the future of this brand." The fallout was swift and silent. Two discreet security guards, men who knew Mr. Park on sight and had been waiting outside, entered the store. They did not touch Ms. Choi, but their presence was an immovable wall. Humiliated, speechless, and trembling with a mixture of rage and terror, She gathered her purse and walked out of the store she had ruled like a petty tyrant, her career and reputation shattered in a matter of minutes. The other staff stood frozen, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. Jin-woo ignored them, his focus entirely on Kiera. She was leaning against a display case, looking pale, her mind reeling from the whiplash of the last 10 minutes. She had gone from being fired and facing eviction to witnessing a corporate execution and being praised by the mythical owner of the entire company. "Are you all right?" Jin-woo asked, his voice returning to a more normal, human tone. She nodded slowly, trying to process the deception, the test, the sheer unreality of it all. I don't understand," she whispered. "Why?" He sighed, a hint of the weariness from his disguise returning, though this time it was genuine. "Because I was beginning to believe that people like you didn't exist anymore," he said, his voice laced with a self-deprecating honesty. "I am surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. I wanted to see how my employees behaved when they thought no one of consequence was watching. I was testing their character." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability in the powerful man's eyes. "I did not realize mine was also being tested." He then made her an offer that made the air leave her lungs. "The position of store manager is now vacant. I want you to take it. The salary will be triple what you are making now, and I have instructed my office to wire a $50,000 bonus to your account immediately. Consider it back pay for all the decency you've been showing on my company's behalf." Kiera stared at him, overwhelmed. Relief, so powerful it was dizzying, washed over her, but it was tangled with a knot of complex emotions. This man, this powerful, deceptive man, had played with her, had pushed her to the brink. He had been her savior, but the salvation had come from the very hand that had orchestrated her torment. 6 months later, the sunlight streaming into Elysian timepieces felt different. It felt warmer, more welcoming. Under Kiera Washington's management, the store had transformed. The oppressive, judgmental silence had been replaced by a quiet, respectful hum. Sales were up by 30%. The staff, hired by Kiera herself, were chosen not just for their expertise, but for their empathy. She had built a team that understood a watch's true value was measured in the moments it would witness for its owner. Kiera herself was transformed. The perpetual exhaustion in her eyes had been replaced by a confident, serene light. She had moved with Chloe into a beautiful new apartment with a small balcony garden. Chloe was enrolled in a wonderful school, and the fear of the first of the month was a distant, faded memory. Jin-woo Park had remained a distant figure, an owner who trusted his new manager implicitly. He received the glowing weekly reports and felt a sense of pride that was new to him, a pride not in profits, but in people. One crisp autumn afternoon, he walked into the store. He wore a perfectly tailored Italian suit, no longer in disguise. Kiera was showing a young couple a watch for their anniversary, her voice full of genuine warmth and excitement for them. She saw him and excused herself, a flicker of the old uncertainty crossing her features for a moment before her professional calm took over. "Mr. Park," she said, her tone respectful but not fawning. He smiled, a real smile, not the one he used in boardrooms.
"Kiera."
"I was hoping I might have a moment." They stood by the window, watching the city rush by. "I never properly apologized," he began, his voice quiet. "My methods were unorthodox.
"Deceptive."
I put you in an impossible position to satisfy my own cynicism," Kiera considered his words. "You did," she agreed, her honesty as unwavering as ever. "But you also gave me an opportunity to prove to myself what I was made of. And you changed my daughter's life. For that, I will always be grateful." A comfortable silence settled between them, a bridge built across the chasm of their different worlds. "I was wondering," he said, his voice tinged with a hesitation she had never heard from him, "if you might let me buy you a coffee sometime." As Jin-woo, not as a test, Kiera looked at the man before her. No longer a pauper, no longer a god, just a man learning humility. A genuine, beautiful smile spread across her face. "I'd like that very much." In the end, the story was never about the price of a watch, but about the pricelessness of a person's character. It serves as a powerful reminder that the greatest wealth we can ever accumulate is the integrity we show and the dignity we afford to others, especially when we think no one is watching. For true value is not worn on the wrist, It is carried in the heart. If this story touched you, remember to subscribe for more tales that explore the quiet battles and stunning victories of the human spirit.